Ethan stood in his small, dimly lit workshop on Space Station Nova 9, wiping the oil from his hands. His workshop was filled with old tools, engine parts, and spare wires hanging from every wall. To most, it looked like a mess, but to Ethan, it was perfect. He liked working alone and keeping to himself. The space station was busy, with aliens from all over the galaxy passing through, but Ethan didn't care much for all the activity. His job as a mechanic was simple: fix ships, keep his head down, and avoid unnecessary trouble. But trouble found him that day. As he tightened the last bolt on a repaired engine, Ethan heard a soft knock on the metal door of his workshop. He glanced over, expecting to see one of his usual customers, a pilot with a broken thruster or a merchant with a damaged hull. Instead, when the door slid open, two tall figures stood there, watching him with nervous eyes. The two visitors were identical in appearance, with greenish-blue skin that shimmered under the workshop's dim light. Their hair, long and silvery, flowed down their shoulders like strands of stardust. Each of them wore strange, flowing robes with intricate patterns that seemed to shift as they moved. Ethan recognized their species immediately. They were Zentheri, a mysterious race rarely seen on Nova 9. The sisters stepped inside, glancing around the workshop as if unsure whether they should even be there. One of them stepped forward, her voice soft but urgent. "Are you the human mechanic?" she asked, her large violet eyes studying him carefully. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I'm the mechanic. Name's Ethan. What do you need?" The other sister quickly spoke. "Our ship. It's damaged. We need it fixed, and no one else will help us." Her tone was both pleading and fearful. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "No one. There are plenty of mechanics on this station. Why come to me?" The sisters exchanged a quick look. Then the first one answered, "Our ship isn't just broken. It was sabotage. Someone removed parts from the engine, and it won't run without them." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "We think they're trying to keep us here." Ethan frowned. Sabotage. That was serious. Nova 9 was a bustling station, but even here, such incidents weren't common. He looked at the twins more closely, noticing their tense posture and the worry in their eyes. They looked scared, like they were running from something or someone. "All right," he said, crossing his arms. "Show me what's wrong. I'll take a look, but I'm not promising anything yet." The sisters let out a sigh of relief, and Ethan followed them through the crowded hallways of Nova 9. They led him to a small docking bay, tucked away from the main area. In the center sat their ship, a sleek silver craft with unusual markings. Its design was unfamiliar to Ethan, but he could tell it was advanced. As they approached, he noticed scorch marks on the hull, as if the ship had recently escaped a firefight. Ethan climbed inside and got to work. He checked the engine first, and as the sisters had said, parts were missing, critical parts. Without them, the ship couldn't go anywhere. He muttered under his breath, annoyed by the complexity of the task. Whoever had removed these parts knew exactly how to cripple the ship. While he worked, the sisters stood nearby, watching every move he made. After a few minutes of silence, Ethan glanced up. "So, who's after you two?" he asked, keeping his voice casual. The sisters looked at each other, then back at him. We're in trouble with a group from our planet," one of them said, hesitating. "They don't want us to leave." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, I figured that much. But why come to me? Why not just hide and wait it out?" "We can't wait," the other sister replied. "They'll find us eventually. If we don't leave soon, they'll drag us back, and we'll never be free." Ethan could hear the fear in her voice, and despite himself, he felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to feel trapped, though his troubles were far less dangerous than theirs seemed to be. "Well," he said, scratching his head, "if you want this ship running again, I'll need some time and a few hard-to-find parts. It's not going to be easy." The sisters nodded eagerly. "We'll do anything to get it fixed. We just need a chance to escape." Ethan sighed, realizing he was getting himself into more than just a repair job. This was real trouble, the kind he usually avoided. But as he looked at the twins, he couldn't turn them away. They needed help, and he was the only one willing to give it. "All right, I'll help you," he said finally. "But let's hope your enemies don't come looking for you here." The twins nodded, grateful. As Ethan began his work, he knew that his quiet life as a mechanic was about to get a lot more complicated. Hidden problems. Ethan worked quietly inside the twin ship, examining every part of the engine. The dim lights in the docking bay cast shadows over the ship's silver surface, and the air was filled with a faint smell of burnt metal. It was clear that this wasn't just a regular engine issue. Someone had gone out of their way to damage this ship in a way that made it nearly impossible to fix. Ethan knelt down, wiping the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. The missing parts were important ones, and he couldn't just replace them with any regular pieces. Whoever had done this had made sure that the ship couldn't fly without some very rare equipment. He looked up at the twins, Lyra and Nissa, who stood nervously by the entrance of the ship. They kept glancing around, as if expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. Ethan could see they were tense, even scared. This wasn't just a normal repair job, and he was beginning to understand why other mechanics had turned them away. "You two seem pretty worried," Ethan said, his voice low as he examined the wiring. "Are you sure there's no one on this station who could help you?" Lyra, the older of the two sisters, looked at him with sad, tired eyes. "No one else would listen to us. People know who's after us, and they don't want to get involved." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And who exactly is after you?" Nissa, the younger sister, shifted nervously. "Our own people," she said softly. "We were supposed to join a group back on our home planet, but we didn't want to. They don't allow anyone to leave. So we ran." Ethan listened, nodding slowly. He had heard about the Zenthari and their strict rules. Leaving their planet or going against their leaders could lead to serious consequences. He started to understand why these two were so desperate. "Well, whoever damaged this ship knew exactly what they were doing," Ethan said, pointing to the missing engine parts. "They wanted to make sure you couldn't leave. This kind of damage isn't easy to fix, and it's going to take time." Lyra's face fell. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice trembling. "They'll come looking for us. If we're found, they'll take us back, and we'll lose our freedom forever." Ethan felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to feel trapped, even if his own situation wasn't as extreme. "I'll do my best to get this ship running again," he said, his voice firm. "But if someone really wants you stuck here, they'll probably come back to check." Just as he said that, he noticed something unusual, a small blinking light hidden deep within the engine compartment. Frowning, Ethan reached in and pulled out a tiny black device. It looked like a tracker. The twins gasped when they saw it. "A tracker," Nissa whispered, horrified. "They've been tracking us this whole time." Ethan's face grew serious. "That explains a lot," he muttered, tossing the device onto the floor. "They probably know exactly where you are. It's a miracle they haven't already shown up." Lyra and Nissa looked at each other, fear clear on their faces. "We're in more trouble than we thought," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan clenched his jaw, feeling a mix of frustration and determination. He hadn't asked for this kind of danger, but now that he was involved, he couldn't just abandon them. He picked up the tracker and examined it closely. "This tracker means we're on borrowed time," he said, looking at the twins. "We need to get rid of it and find a way to keep you hidden while I work on the repairs." Lyra nodded. "We can't stay here. They'll find us too easily." Ethan thought for a moment, then had an idea. "There's an old maintenance bay on the lower levels of this station," he said. "No one uses it anymore, and it's out of sight. We can hide there while I finish fixing the ship." The twins exchanged a quick, hopeful look, and Lyra nodded. "Thank you," Ethan, we didn't expect anyone to help us. Ethan shrugged, trying to hide the slight warmth in his chest. I'm not doing this for free, you know. But you look like you could use a friend right now. Nissa gave him a small smile. We could, she said quietly. Ethan packed up his tools and motioned for the sisters to follow him. They moved quickly and quietly through the station, staying away from crowded areas. The twins kept close to Ethan, trusting him to guide them safely. Finally, they'd reached the old maintenance bay. It was dark and dusty, filled with broken parts and old machinery that hadn't been used in years. Ethan set down his tools and looked at the twins. This place isn't much, he said, but it'll keep you hidden for now. Just don't make any noise, and keep out of sight. Lyra nodded. We understand. We'll wait here while you do what you need to. Ethan turned to leave, but stopped when he saw the anxious looks on their faces. I'll be back soon, he promised. Just stay put. As he walked back to the ship to continue the repairs, he felt a strange sense of responsibility. He hadn't expected this when he woke up that morning, but now he knew he couldn't leave the twins to face this danger alone. Trouble was coming, and Ethan knew he had to be ready. The hunters arrive. Ethan worked quickly, his hands moving with steady focus as he tightened bolts and connected wires inside the twin ship. Every second felt like a race against time. He knew the tracker he had found meant danger was near. Lyra and Nissa waited quietly in the dark, abandoned maintenance bay, keeping as still and silent as possible. They were relying on Ethan, and he could feel the weight of their trust. Suddenly, Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by the loud sound of boots on metal floors. A group of figures had entered the docking area, each one dressed in black armor that glinted under the station's harsh lights. They moved in a tight formation, each holding a weapon and looking around with sharp, trained eyes. Ethan's heart sank. These were bounty hunters, and they weren't here by accident. The lead hunter, a tall, muscular alien with dark scales covering his skin, held a small device that beeped quietly. He was scanning the area, following the signal. Ethan guessed that it was another tracker picking up the twins' location. The hunters were getting closer with each beep, each step. Keeping his movements slow and careful, Ethan ducked behind a stack of crates, trying to stay out of sight. He knew he couldn't outrun them if they saw him. He had to stay hidden. His mind raced as he thought of ways to distract the hunters and buy himself more time to finish repairing the ship. The lead hunter, whose voice was as rough as gravel, spoke into a small communicator. Target signal is active. The twins are close. Spread out. They can't be far. Ethan held his breath, watching as the group of hunters split up, each of them searching a different area of the docking bay. His heart pounded as he realized they were searching every nook and cranny, leaving no corner unchecked. One of the hunters, a smaller alien with bright green skin and sharp eyes, moved closer to Ethan's hiding spot. He glanced around, his weapon ready, and Ethan could feel the tension growing. He tried to stay calm, focusing on what he needed to do next. If he could get back to the ship and finish the repairs without being seen, they might have a chance to escape. But first, he had to distract the hunters. Looking around, he noticed a small metal pipe lying nearby. Carefully, he picked it up and threw it toward the opposite side of the docking bay. The pipe clanged loudly as it hit the floor, echoing in the large space. Instantly, the hunters turned toward the sound, their weapons raised. Over there, shouted the lead hunter, pointing toward the noise. Ethan took advantage of the distraction, moving quickly and quietly back to the twin ship. He slipped inside the engine compartment and continued working, his hands shaking slightly from the close call. He knew he didn't have much time. The hunters would soon realize they'd been fooled. Meanwhile, Lyra and Nissa waited anxiously in the hidden maintenance bay. They could hear faint voices and footsteps echoing through the station's metal corridors, and they exchanged nervous glances. Every sound made them jump, and they wondered if Ethan was safe, or if the hunters had found him. They knew that if the hunters discovered them, it would be over. There would be no escape. Back in the docking bay, the lead hunter's eyes narrowed as he realized they'd been tricked. He motioned for his team to regroup, and they moved back toward the twin ship, searching more carefully this time. Ethan worked faster, his fingers moving quickly as he tightened the last few connections. The engine roared to life, and he let out a relieved breath. The ship was ready to fly, but he still had to get Lyra and Nyssa on board without alerting the hunters. Just as he was about to leave the ship, he saw the lead hunter coming straight toward him, his weapon drawn. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had no choice now but to act. With quick thinking, he grabbed a wrench and threw it toward a control panel on the far wall. Sparks flew as the panel shorted out, causing the lights in the docking bay to flicker and dim. The sudden darkness and noise created confusion, and the hunters began shouting, their weapons aimed in all directions. Taking advantage of the chaos, Ethan slipped out of the ship and hurried to the maintenance bay where the twins were hiding. "Come on," he whispered urgently. "The ship's ready. We have to go now." Lyra and Nyssa followed him without hesitation, their faces filled with a mix of fear and determination. Together, they moved as quietly as possible back to the docking bay, where the lights continued to flicker. The hunters were still disoriented, struggling to see in the dim light. Ethan led the twins onto the ship and quickly sealed the hatch. He rushed to the controls and powered up the engines, glancing out the window to see the hunters finally noticing the ship's movement. The lead hunter's face twisted in anger as he shouted orders, but it was too late. With a powerful blast, the ship lifted off the docking bay floor and sped out of the station, leaving the hunters behind. As they moved into open space, Ethan finally relaxed, letting out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "We made it," he said, looking at Lyra and Nyssa. The twins' faces were filled with relief and gratitude. They were safe for now, but Ethan knew their journey was far from over. They still had a long way to go, and he was ready to face whatever came next. Hiding and repairing. The stars stretched out before them as Ethan guided the twin ship away from Nova 9. They had escaped, but he knew they couldn't relax just yet. The hunters were still out there, and it was only a matter of time before they tried to track the ship again. Lyra and Nyssa sat quietly, each looking out the small window, their eyes filled with both relief and worry. For now, they were free. But for how long? Ethan took a deep breath and spoke over the hum of the engines. "We'll need a safe place to hide while I finish repairing the ship," he said. "This thing barely has enough power to make it out of the station. We can't go far with it in this condition." Nyssa looked over, her expression anxious. "How bad is it?" she asked. Ethan sighed, glancing down at the control panel. "The engine's holding, but not for long. Whoever sabotaged it did a good job. If we don't stop somewhere to fix it properly, it'll break down mid-flight." Lyra nodded. "Is there a place we can hide nearby?" Ethan thought for a moment, mentally mapping the nearby regions. "There's an old asteroid field not too far from here. No one goes there because it's tough to navigate. We should be able to hide among the rocks and make repairs without being noticed." The twins nodded, trusting his plan. With a few adjustments to the controls, Ethan set a course for the asteroid field. The ship jolted and rattled as it moved forward, and he could feel the engine straining. He knew he had to act fast. A short while later, they entered the asteroid field. Massive rocks drifted in space, their dark surfaces casting long shadows. Ethan skillfully guided the ship through the floating boulders, keeping a careful eye on the radar to avoid collisions. After a few tense minutes, he found a large asteroid with a cave-like opening. It was the perfect spot to hide. He carefully eased the ship into the opening and powered down the engine to avoid any signals that might give away their position. The silence inside the cave was heavy, with only the soft hum of the backup systems keeping them company. Once they were safely hidden, Ethan turned to Lyra and Nyssa. "We're safe for now, but I'll need some time to fix the engine completely," he said. "We can't stay here too long, though." The hunters might search the asteroid field if they realize we've escaped. The twins nodded in understanding. Nissa leaned forward, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Ethan. You didn't have to help us, but you did. We owe you our lives. Ethan waved a hand, brushing off the compliment. Let's just focus on getting out of this mess first, he replied. We're not safe yet. With that, Ethan gathered his tools and headed to the engine room at the back of the ship. The twins followed, eager to help. The engine room was cramped, with pipes and wires running along every wall. The main engine was a tangled mess of cables and parts, and Ethan could see the damage more clearly now. Parts had been removed or twisted out of place, making it difficult to repair. This might take a while, he muttered, grabbing a wrench and starting to loosen a damaged bolt. Lyra and Nissa watched him work, their eyes filled with concern. Is there anything we can do to help? Lyra asked. Ethan thought for a moment, then handed her a small toolkit. Hold the light steady and pass me tools when I ask. It'll speed things up. As he worked, the twins stayed by his side, quietly assisting him. Lyra held the light while Nissa handed him tools and cleared away broken parts. They worked in silence, but there was a sense of teamwork that brought them closer. Ethan could feel the tension lifting as they focused on the repairs, each of them determined to see this through. Hours passed, and the work was slow, but Ethan didn't stop. He could feel the engine beginning to take shape again, each new part bringing it closer to running smoothly. Despite the cramped conditions and the risk hanging over them, he felt a strange sense of purpose. These two needed him, and he was determined not to let them down. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan tightened the last bolt and stepped back, wiping his forehead with a tired smile. That should do it, he said. The engine should be strong enough to get us out of here and far away from Nova 9. The twins' faces lit up with relief and gratitude. Thank you, Ethan, Nissa said, her voice full of emotion. You've done more for us than we ever expected. Ethan shrugged, trying to hide his own relief. It's not over yet. We still have to make it past the hunters if they're waiting for us. But at least now we have a fighting chance. As they prepared to leave, Ethan noticed Lyra looking at him with a thoughtful expression. Why did you help us? She asked softly. You didn't know us, yet you risked everything for our freedom. Ethan paused, thinking about her question. I guess I've always hated seeing people trapped, he admitted, his voice low. Everyone deserves a chance to be free. Lyra nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in his words. She and Nissa exchanged a look, each of them silently thanking him for his kindness. With the repairs complete, Ethan powered up the engine, and the ship roared to life. The sound was smooth and strong, filling them with hope. It was time to leave the asteroid field and face whatever awaited them. Ethan guided the ship out of the cave and into open space, his hand steady on the controls. As they sped forward, the twins sat beside him, their fear now mixed with determination. They had come this far, and with Ethan by their side, they felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, taking a big risk. As the ship glided away from the asteroid field, Ethan felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The repairs had gone well, but now they had to decide their next move. They could not head back to Nova 9, where the hunters would surely be looking for them. Instead, they needed a plan that would keep them safe. Ethan glanced at Lyra and Nissa, who were deep in conversation. He could see the worry in their eyes. The twins were discussing their options, and it was clear they felt the weight of their situation. Ethan, what do we do now? Lyra asked, her voice filled with concern. We can't just fly aimlessly through space. The hunters could find us again. Ethan rubbed his chin, thinking. I know a nearby planet called Aloria, he said finally. It's mostly uninhabited, and the surface is filled with thick forests and mountains. We can land there and hide for a while. It'll give us a chance to plan our next move. Nissa frowned. But what if the hunters follow us? They might check Aloria if they think we're hiding there. Ethan nodded, understanding her fear. That's a risk we'll have to take. We can't stay in space forever. The longer we wait, the more danger we put ourselves in. Aloria is our best shot. After a moment, the twins exchanged glances. They knew he was right. They needed to act before it was too late. Let's do it, Lyra said, her voice steady. We have to take the chance. With a determined nod, Ethan adjusted the ship's course. The engines hummed as they sped toward Aloria. The vast emptiness of space surrounded them, but in that moment, they felt a flicker of hope. As they approached the planet, Ethan carefully navigated through the thick clouds that shrouded its surface. He could see patches of green below, but the mountains and forests could easily hide them from any searching ships. Here we go, he said, gripping the controls tightly. I'll find a good place to land. He scanned the area, looking for a safe spot among the trees. Finally, he spotted a small clearing near a stream that glimmered in the sunlight. There, he pointed. That looks perfect. Ethan guided the ship down, landing smoothly on the ground. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the reality of their situation. They had escaped the hunters for now, but they still faced many unknowns. Once the ship was secured, Ethan turned to the twins. We should gather some supplies before we head out. We don't know how long we'll need to stay hidden. Lyra and Nissa nodded and quickly began gathering backpacks from the ship. They filled them with food and water, taking everything they could carry. The adrenaline of their escape still coursed through them, and they felt a mix of urgency and determination. After packing their supplies, they stepped out of the ship into the fresh, earthy air of Aloria. The sound of birds chirping filled their ears, and the soft rustle of leaves created a sense of calm. But Ethan knew better. They had to stay vigilant. Let's find a spot deeper in the forest, he suggested. We can set up a temporary camp and figure out our next move. The twins agreed, and they set off into the woods, moving cautiously among the trees. The forest was thick, and Ethan led the way, scanning their surroundings for any signs of danger. He could feel the tension rising again, aware that they were far from safe. After walking for a while, they found a small clearing surrounded by tall trees. It was hidden enough that they could set up camp without being seen easily. They decided to rest and gather their thoughts. Ethan pulled out a map of the area he had saved on his communicator. Okay, here's what we need to consider, he said, pointing to different locations on the map. We can either try to find a way off this planet, or we can wait for the hunters to give up looking for us. But if we stay too long, they might discover our location. Lyra looked worried. But what if they find us? We can't just hide here forever. Ethan nodded, understanding her fear. We need to think of a plan to throw them off our trail. Maybe we can set up some distractions or create a false signal that leads them away from us. Nissa's eyes lit up with an idea. What if we used the ship's old systems to send a fake signal? If we can make it look like we're still in space, it might buy us some time. That's a great idea, Ethan replied, feeling the surge of hope. If we can make the signal strong enough, they'll think we're still out there. The twins started discussing the details, their voices filled with excitement and energy. Ethan couldn't help but smile. He realized that despite the danger they faced, they were working together as a team. After a while, they decided to break for the night. They built a small fire, careful not to let the flames get too high. As they sat around it, the warmth of the fire made them feel a little safer. They shared stories about their lives, laughing and enjoying the moment despite the danger surrounding them. Ethan felt a bond growing between them. He had stepped in to help two strangers, but now they were like family. They were fighting for their freedom together, and he wouldn't let anything happen to them. As the stars sparkled above, Ethan knew they were taking a big risk, but sometimes the biggest risks brought the greatest rewards. Together, they would find a way to outsmart the hunters and secure their freedom. The final repairs. As dawn broke over Aloria, Ethan awoke to the sound of birds singing and the soft rustle of leaves. He sat up, stretching his arms and glancing around the camp. Lyra and Nissa were still asleep by the fire, their faces relaxed in peaceful dreams. For a moment, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. They had survived the night, but the danger was far from over. Ethan quietly stood up, trying not to disturb the twins, and walked a little deeper into the forest. He needed to think about their next steps. The plan to send a fake signal was a good start, but they needed the ship to be fully functional to escape Aloria and the hunters. After gathering his thoughts, Ethan returned to the camp and found the twins waking up. Lyra yawned and stretched, while Nissa rubbed her eyes, looking a bit groggy. "Good morning," Ethan said cheerfully. "I hope you both slept well." Lyra smiled. "Better than I expected. It's nice to be out here, even with everything going on." Nissa nodded, her eyes brightening. "So, what's next? Are we really going to fix the ship today?" Ethan nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "Yes, we need to finish the repairs. I have the tools and parts we need back in the ship. Once we get everything in order, we can set up the fake signal and get out of here." The twins jumped up, energized by his enthusiasm. "Let's do it," Lyra exclaimed. After a quick breakfast of the food they had packed, they headed back to the ship. The trees towered above them, casting long shadows on the ground. Ethan led the way, his heart pounding with anticipation. This was their chance to escape. Once they reached the ship, Ethan opened the hatch and climbed inside. He quickly grabbed the tools and parts he had stored. The engine was still partially disassembled, but he felt confident that today would be the day they finished the job. "Okay, here's what we need to do," Ethan explained as he laid out the tools on the floor. "We have to reconnect these wires and replace the damaged parts. It might take some time, but we have to be thorough." Lyra and Nissa nodded, ready to help. "What can we do?" Nissa asked, eager to contribute. Ethan pointed to a pile of wires. "You can help me sort these. I need the right ones to connect to the engine. If we mix them up, it could cause even more problems." The twins got to work, sorting through the wires and handing Ethan the ones he needed. The sound of clanking tools and muffled conversations filled the ship as they worked together. Ethan felt grateful to have their support. It made the task feel less daunting. As he carefully reconnected the wires, Ethan kept one eye on the ship's systems. He needed to make sure everything was functioning correctly before they could leave. After what felt like hours, they had made significant progress. The engine was nearly ready to run again. "Okay, let's take a quick break," Ethan said, wiping his brow. "We're close, but I want to check the systems one more time before we finish." The twins agreed, and they stepped outside for some fresh air. The forest was alive with sounds. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, and a gentle breeze flowing through the trees. It felt peaceful, but Ethan knew they couldn't let their guard down. "Do you think the hunters will come here?" Lyra asked, her expression turning serious. Ethan looked at the sky, then back at the twins. "It's hard to say. They could still be looking for us, but if we're careful, we can avoid detection. The fake signal should buy us some time, but we need to finish these repairs first." As they stood outside, the sun began to rise higher in the sky, casting bright rays through the trees. Ethan felt a renewed sense of hope. They had come this far, and he believed they could make it through this. "Let's get back to it," Ethan said, determination filling his voice. "We're almost there." Once inside, Ethan resumed work on the engine, carefully tightening screws and connecting wires. The twins helped by passing tools and checking the systems as he worked. Slowly but surely, they were putting everything back together. "Got it," Ethan exclaimed, securing the last bolt. He stepped back and wiped his hands on his pants, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. "That should do it. Now let's see if it runs." He climbed into the pilot's seat and powered up the engine. The ship hummed to life, and Ethan could feel the vibrations through the control panel. The sound was music to his ears. He glanced at the twins, who were watching with hopeful eyes. "Here goes nothing," he said, taking a deep breath. He pressed a few buttons, and the engine roared louder, its power echoing in the small space. Suddenly, the lights on the control panel flickered, and a warning beep sounded. Ethan's heart sank. "What's happening?" Nissa asked, panic rising in her voice. "Stay calm," Ethan replied, quickly checking the screens. "It looks like we got a power fluctuation. I might need to reroute some energy to stabilize it." The twins watched anxiously as Ethan worked quickly, his fingers flying over the controls. Come on," he muttered under his breath, desperate to fix the issue. After a few tense moments, the lights stabilized, and the beeping stopped. Ethan leaned back, relief washing over him. "I think we're good. The engine is running strong." The twins cheered, their faces lighting up with joy. "We did it," Lyra exclaimed, and they hugged each other tightly. Ethan smiled, feeling a rush of pride. Now let's set up that fake signal and get ready to leave. With renewed energy, they began working on the ship's communication systems. It was time to create their diversion and escape Aloria for good. The final repairs had been a challenge, but together, they had triumphed. As Ethan initiated the signal, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something big. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for freedom, and they were ready to face whatever came next. Safe at last. With the fake signal set and the engine humming steadily, Ethan felt a surge of hope. The hard work had paid off, and now they were ready to escape Aloria. He looked at Lyra and Nissa, who were both buzzing with excitement. "Are you both ready?" Ethan asked, his heart racing. "Once we leave, we need to stay alert. The hunters might still be out there." Lyra nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." Nissa adjusted her backpack, her expression serious. "Let's do this. I want to be safe." Ethan smiled, appreciating their courage. "All right then, let's take off." He powered up the ship's systems and prepared for departure. The engines roared as he navigated the controls. The ship began to lift off the ground, rising above the trees and into the sky. The view was breathtaking. Green forests stretched out below them, and the sunlight sparkled on the river they had passed earlier. As they ascended higher, Ethan felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. They were finally leaving Aloria behind, but the hunters could still be a threat. He focused on the ship's sensors, scanning for any signs of danger. "Everything looks clear," he said, glancing back at the twins. "We should be safe for now." They flew higher and higher, breaking through the cloud cover. The stars began to twinkle in the vast blackness of space. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had escaped the planet, but they were not out of the woods yet. "Let's check the signal," he suggested, turning to the twins. "If it's working, we should be able to distract the hunters while we make our escape." They gathered around the control panel, watching the screens as Ethan adjusted the signal's frequency. "Here we go," he said, pressing a few buttons. The display showed a map of the nearby regions, and Ethan initiated the fake signal. A moment later, it flickered to life, sending out a burst of energy. It created the illusion that their ship was still on Aloria, moving in a different direction. "Perfect," Ethan said, feeling a rush of excitement. "Now they'll think we're still on the planet." Nissa grinned. "Let's hope it works. We can finally be safe." Ethan set a course for the nearest space station, where they could lay low for a while. The ship glided smoothly through the stars, and the weight of the danger slowly began to lift. For the first time in days, they felt free. As they traveled, the three of them shared stories about their lives. Ethan told the twins about his life as a mechanic, fixing ships and helping travelers. Lyra shared tales of her home planet, filled with beautiful landscapes and vibrant cities. Nissa spoke about her dreams of adventure, wanting to see the galaxy beyond her world. They laughed together, their spirits lifting with each story. It felt good to bond and connect after everything they had been through. The ship became more than just a vehicle. It was their home for the moment. Hours passed, and they finally spotted the space station ahead. It was a bustling hub of activity, with ships coming and going. Ethan maneuvered the ship toward the docking bay, his heart racing with anticipation. Once they landed, they stepped out of the ship, taking in their new surroundings. The space station was alive with sounds and colors. People hurried by, chatting and laughing. The atmosphere was a stark contrast to the danger they had just escaped. "Welcome to safety," Ethan said with a grin. He felt a sense of relief wash over him as he took a deep breath, savoring the moment. They had made it. Now what? Lyra asked, looking around. "What should we do next?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Let's get some food and rest. We've been through a lot, and we deserve a break. Once we're rested, we can decide what to do next. You can both choose where you want to go." Nissa's eyes sparkled. "I want to explore. This place looks amazing." Lyra nodded in agreement. "Me too. Let's see what adventures await us here." They found a small cafe on the station and ordered some food. As they sat together, eating and chatting, Ethan couldn't help but feel grateful. He had stepped in to help two strangers, but now they were friends, united by their experiences. After their meal, they decided to explore the station. They wandered through shops filled with colorful goods, met interesting people, and watched as ships flew in and out of the docking bays. Every corner held something new and exciting. As they walked, Ethan felt a warmth in his heart. They had faced danger and uncertainty together, but now they were safe. They had built a bond that would last, no matter where they went next. After a long day of exploring, they returned to their ship, ready to rest. The stars twinkled above them as they settled in, the hum of the station comforting in the background. "I can't believe we made it," Nissa said, yawning. "I feel like we can finally breathe." Ethan smiled, glancing at the twins. "We did it together. No matter what happens next, we'll face it as a team." Lyra and Nissa nodded, their expressions filled with determination. They had come a long way, and their journey was just beginning. With friends by their side, they were ready to take on whatever adventures awaited them in the galaxy. As Ethan closed his eyes, he felt a sense of peace. They were safe at last, and the stars above held endless possibilities. Together, they would explore the universe, creating new stories and memories. And so, their adventure continued.